Hi guys, so I noticed that we've reached 300 subs and that's amazing. I never expected to reach such results since I'm making videos in another language and I'm not like a very good computer technician. So before the video starts, I'd like to thank you all for your support and your love. Hi there! For this video things went a little off schedule, so I have to read up the entire video, otherwise it will be too long and confusing. So here we are. In this episode we are going to take a look at this computer here. This is an Olivetti M6 460 Suprema. It is a 486 from 1993, I guess? But anyway, as I said in a previous video, there are some things to address. The monitor is cracked on the plastic bezel. Unfortunately it wasn't packed very well, and those kind of monitors are pretty fragile and heavy, so yeah, that is. At least it's still working. For now, let's power it up and see what happens. So the computer is trying to boot, at least it's performing the regular startup diagnostic. At that time I was not having a working keyboard connected, so that's the reason for the error 8. Since the battery is completely dead, of course, we are greeted by the very unusual Olivetti BIOS, which apparently resides right onto the hard disk, unlike regular BIOSes. I tried making an user diskette copy, since the hard disk can be damaged, but the floppy drive seems not to work. So, before I start digging too much into the problems, let's address the monitor issues. First of all, let's remove the case for further investigations, and right away I noticed that the screws are pretty darn loose all around the case. Then I tried like for 40 minutes to unclip this panel, which was hiding 2 screws, and when finally I was able to remove it, I noticed that the plastic standoffs for the screws were completely baked, disintegrated, turned into dust. I tried to recover and reglue the pieces together with superglue, but it was an impossible task, so I moved on and continued to disassemble the electronics from the plastic case. Now I ended up with 2 parts that do not fit together, since all the screw threads are gone. I had to think some solutions to make the 2 pieces of the case fit together again, so first I thought I could make a big blob of baking soda and superglue, then drill it with a drill and make my way through with an original screw in order to redo the threads. But the baking soda plus superglue mixture is very brittle, so it broke as I tried to turn the screwdriver. Then an epiphany. I could have formed the blob of glue all around the screw, so it would have the thread nice and solid. And it worked, more or less. They are certainly not pretty to look at, but they work. Next, while I was cleaning the analog CRT board, I saw a wet area around the capacitor, a sign that that capacitor vented at some point, so better replace it. It is a standard 16V 470 microfarad. So I reglued the cracks in the bezels. For the big missing chunk I used the same trick with superglue and baking soda. I have not thinned those 2 parts since I was focused on the screws, and now it's time to join all the pieces together and to fix the stand for the monitor. If you watch carefully, you can see the reflection of a friend of mine in the screen, so here I have even proved that I have actual friends. Unbelievable, right? So back to the main unit. Time to see if it's still working, and seems to be the case. After I rebooted the computer, it gave me this memory error. Perhaps the RAM is bad? Time to open the main unit and take a look. There are 2 thumb screws and the cover just slides off. and I cut myself with the metal shield inside. This is very sharp metal, to be honest. So this is the internal of the computer. That's the PSU, and it is proprietary of course, but it has the standard Molex connector, so the voltages are pretty much the same. The processor has an health sink, but it's all slipped all the way up, probably because the computer was used on an angle, so that will be the next item in the agenda. Next to it there is the socket for an Intel overdrive. Those CPUs are not exactly common, plus they are not very useful upgrades, so yes, but I will pass on that. On the front here there are the floppy drive, a 3.5-inch one, and the hard disk. While I was talking about the floppy and the hard disk cage, I barely touched the LED for the power and the hard disk status, and the plastic bracket just broke off. Another thing to reglue, I guess. Right under the PSU there was the sound card, a proprietary one from Analog Devices. There were some ISA cards that used this chip, but I'm gonna tell you, the drivers are not the same, and I was never able to make this sound card work. I was wondering if there were other sound cards in this form factor, since it is not integrated into the motherboard, but I haven't found anything. This right here is the video section. That's the video RAM, I guess, and this is the main feature. This is a video chip made by ATI, and it's called the Mach 32. The Mach series started with the Mach 8, which was a clone of the VGA card used by IBM in the MCA series, the IBM 8514-A. And this right here is a 2D accelerator, so not too bad for an integrated video chip. The battery is a standard 6V one made by Duracell, and if we test it with my DMM we can confirm that it is actually dead. So let's take a look at the hard disk and the floppy drive situation, and oh man, the nightmare. Actually the hard disk is a corner one, so I bet it will be dead as a doornail. Even though the computer is actually reading the portion of the disk which contains the BIOS, it's taking hours to do so, and it has not an healthy sound. Now time for some floppy drive maintenance. If you recall, at the beginning the drive was not working properly, so I think a good cleaning and lubricating will do the trick. Taking the lid out, it seems a little different from the standard mid-90s kinda drive. It has that gear at the top, and the electronics seems to be fairly complicated, and that's because it is not a 1.44 MB drive. This is a 2.88 MB drive. It can read and write very high density 3.5-inch floppy. But anyway, the first thing I'd like to do is to get the front panel off. Then it's just a matter of cleaning the heads, lubricate the motor and the rails on which the head slides. Usually it's not required with a regular floppy drive, just for the 5.25-inch ones, but this is very similar in the mechanism of ejection to the ones you can find in the Macintoshes. It is a Sony drive after all, so it has a lot of moving parts, and it makes me feel better to clean and lubricate those parts. Now a little sneaky peek into the PSU in order to make sure that everything is in working order. As you can see, the part that's supposed to hold the power button is already broke. The plastic on this computer are pretty fragile, I gotta say. And it is a little bit dusty, but nothing seems to be out of order. No leaky caps, no baked resistors, so let's proceed on the processor. So as you can see, the heatsink, although it's pretty shifted, is holding on super strong, and I don't want to pry between the metal and the processor, cause I risk breaking the ceramic case for the processor. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply heat with my hair dryer to the heatsink, hoping that the glue will give up. I also would like to replace the old dissipator with a little fan and a dissipator underneath. The fact that the metal thing has slided so much gives me the idea that this processor gets pretty hot, so better having two heat dissipation system. In those footages I'm trying to concentrate to the metal heat sink to save the processor to be overheated. Now time to clean the surface of the processor from the glue residue with some alcohol and paper towel, and voila! Now that I've cleaned the drive cage and the rest of the computer off camera, it's time to reassemble the computer. The last thing I'd like to address is the battery. The battery is dead, no surprise, but it is a 6V one, rather than a more common 3V one. To avoid leaking in the future, I'm gonna build a contraption with a prototyping board to get two coin cells of 3V each in series, which should give me 6V no problem. To avoid short circuits between the chassis and the positive terminal of the battery, I'm gonna cover the underneath of the battery cell with felt, which is also allowing me to reuse the velcro sticker inside the case. Now that the computer is clean and everything is in order, it's time to set the computer. At first, I tried using the hard disk to access BIOS, as the last one is resident in a hidden part of the hard disk, and this is because I'd like to try and salvage this hard disk. I was lucky in the past with some old MFM drive. After being formatted they ran just fine, so after the setup in the BIOS I can access the hard disk content. But every command gives me a sector error. So I booted off a floppy disk, now the drive is working fine, and launched fdisk. From here I can format the drive and set an active DOS partition. And since this is an IDE drive, a low-level format is not required if not dangerous to attempt, so yeah. After the first formatting in fdisk, it's necessary to format again from the command prompt and to transfer the command com and the system files. But while formatting, something happened. Errors started to appear randomly but very frequently, and at the end we are left with only 1 MB of damaged sectors, and after some experiment it seems to work. But the surprises are not over. Booting from the hard disk is taking forever, and that's probably due to the hard disk dying. It is so slow that it is actually impossible to use, so I'm gonna install a CF2 IDE module. To do that, I'm gonna boot into the BIOS utility that I've just wrote onto a floppy disk. First, since I'm gonna insert the CHS values, I need to identify those, and there is a handy program that will do that even for compact flashes. It's called IDE Info. So now I have all the data I need. Let's go into the BIOS and insert the correct values. Let's boot into MS-DOS and launch fdisk to partition the disk. The disk is not recognized, no matter what I do. At first I thought that it was a CF problem, since I was using it with another system, with a XT2 CF adapter, so maybe it can be fixed by doing a zero fill in disk part, removing all the informations on the card itself, but nope, still error reading the fixed disk. Since I was lost, I tried using the XT2CF adapter since this system has an ISA bus and it worked, but for the 8-bit. And the 8-bit bus is slowing everything down, acting like a bottleneck so hard that I could not launch Doom for instance, cause it was too slow. Plus, there were some issues with the address of the BIOS for the adapter, so at this point the computer was nearly useless. Still, I've installed the Fields Computer Labs set of drivers and I adapted the configsys and the audexec.bat files to recognize the Italian layout of the keyboard and to exclude the CD-ROM driver since I don't need it. Oh, and of course I've installed a Sound Blaster card, which leaded more issues with the memory address, so I was pretty upset at this point. It generated some glitches in the simpler game, while on more complex one it simply crashes. On Doom for instance, it's not recognizing the sound card for the sound effects, and if I force to do so, it crashes. Some games are working fine, like Vinyl Goddess from Mars. Duke Nukem 3D was simply crashing. Right when I was giving up, another epiphany, the second one. In the utility setup, if we try to change the CMOS data regarding the hard disk, we can select a strange option, which is simply called standard hard disk. Well, when I selected that, I was able to use the CF card from the IDE to CF adapter, de facto using the 16-bit bus. Probably is like an automatic hard disk recognition. This BIOS is very different from the standard one, so yeah, my fault here. But let's try Doom now. It worked flawless. I can select the Sound Blaster as the sound card for SFXs, and it is pretty darn fast now. Duke 3D works great on the standard video quality since 40x480 is not working, cause calls for VISA video cards. Unfortunately, I'm still getting minor glitches in Kim 4 for instance. The camera is making even worse than in person, but it is still playable. And here we go today. What a nightmare, but I'm pretty happy with the results. There are two things that I have not filmed. The original PSU died when I was working on it, so I replaced it with a more modern and a reliable one, and to find out the pinout for the unstandard Olivetti connector, I probed the ISA bus with my DMM in continuity mode. So, what are the performances of this computer here? Let me launch some benchmarking tools. Actually, I was very impressed with the results. I will compare the results with another 486 I built myself a year ago. There should pop a card for the video on the right now. Super Escape runs flawless and gives us a score of 42.1, and my other 486 build accomplished 41.3. Chris 3D it's even better, it gives us 50.2, while the other build has 44. Well, Quake in 360x480 runs, but not so much actually, it's still playable, but it really sucks. And now it's time for the final considerations. Speaking of the aesthetic, I really like this computer. Isn't one of the anonymous beige case of the mid to late 90s, it has this light grey livery that makes it very classy and outstanding compared to the standard beige box. The lines are very industrial looking, pretty simple and pleasing to look at. Everything is squared, yet pretty flat. The monitor is also very industrial looking, it resembles the M20 and M24 monitors with the very advanced tube with near to nothing bezel in front of the tube, unlike the IBM monitors for instance, but even the Commodore ones and really every other manufacturer. In terms of historical importance, I'd say that this computer has none. We are really far from the first experiments and innovations by Olivetti, such as the M20 and the M24 computers. This was designed for the Italian public administration. In fact, this was from a bank near San Marino, so it is not really a gaming machine, but as a standard 486 machine it's pretty capable. The BIOS is very uncomfortable, to say the least, and gave me problems throughout the process of setting it up and making it working. Plus, the idea that the utility for setting the computer should not reside on the motherboard but instead on the hard disk or in a floppy disk as I did is pretty old even for the 1993. In terms of getting a full system, so with a proper keyboard and mouse, I'm working on it. I bought 2 matching keyboards, but none of them is working, I don't know why. The little PCB has only an 8-bit controller on it, plus a couple of diodes, so perhaps the chip is bad, it's prone to failure, I don't know at this point, but it's pretty impossible to find a separate chip, as it's an Olivetti branded one, so I'm gonna continue buying keyboards until I find a working one. And so that's the end. I could do a video in the future when I finally get a full system with an Olivetti keyboard and mouse, but for the moment that's it. Thanks for watching until the end. Remember to subscribe if you'd like to. Check on my social accounts into the description below if you wanna follow me on Instagram, Facebook and so on, and see ya next time.